Okay, 3, 2, 1. We are now recording. I would now like to welcome everybody to this evening's meeting of the Public Safety Committee of Community Board 1. We're delighted to have you this evening. We are going to start with a roll call. For those of you who don't know, and this will allow us also, for those of us who are members of the committee, to get to know each other and make sure we know who we are. I am Chris Hanway. I am honored and delighted to serve as the chair of this committee. So I am counting myself present. And if I could check the attendance of our vice chair, and maybe Frank can also say hello. Frank Fredericks.
Hi, I am present. My name is Frank, and happy to be serving as vice chair of the Public Safety Committee.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to grab a pen so I can do a little attendance checking. I'm going to go through our list now. Is George Alexiou present? Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. I do not think that he is. I know Florence already told us that unfortunately Anne Bruno could not be with us, so I will mark Anne as not present. Keon Betancourt, unfortunately, is flying back into New York City today and did let our CB1 board chair know that they would not be able to make this meeting. So they will touch base with me tomorrow so we can fill them in on the process. Is Jean Marie D'Aleva, again, forgive any mispronunciations, present? Okay, that would be a no. And Dean Feradovich, is Dean present? No? Okay, I would like to welcome our public member who I know is here. And Abdel Razak, is that how we pronounce your name? Abdel Razak Abdel Hamid?
Oh man, you're so good, man.
Oh wow, I'm very impressed.
I'm glad you made it.
Well,
yeah,
we're
because
delighted.
everyone spelling my name. I don't know why, but it's easy like you pronounce it now. That's beautiful.
Well,
that's
thank
good
you
to
so
start.
much. Since you're our first public member, at least in a long while, and those of us on the board know each other, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah,
we'd love to get to know you a bit better. Yeah,
so my name is Abdelrazak Abdel Hamid. I'm an engineer, civil engineer. I'm working in bridge inspection, and I'm a dad for 4 kids. And I used to live in Astoria for more than 20 years now. And really appreciate you guys invite me to be one of your team. And I love, to pay back from our community and do something helpful for them.
Well, we're really thrilled to have you and looking forward to collaborating with you and your input. And I think you'll get a really good opportunity to give some input tonight as we go through the capital and expense budgetary requests from this committee. So thank you again for joining us. I'd like to acknowledge any members of Community Board 1 who are not members of this committee, but who are joining tonight. If you'd like to say hi. Daniel?
Yes, good evening. Daniel Aliberti. I'm actually the board secretary. And I hope we have a great meeting tonight, even though there are less people than, I don't know, I think you were looking for 3 or 4 people who are not here tonight, but I think we'll have a good meeting.
I'm looking forward to it and so glad, and thank you for joining us, Dan. Shahnaz, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chris. My name is Shahnaz Hamdi. I'm the chair for the Health and Human Service. Thanks so much. Good luck.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you with us. I'm just going in the order on my screen, and I apologize in advance. Is it Quinella or Kinella? I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. You said it right. It's Quinella. Hi, all. I'm just here to learn, and I like attending these meetings just to learn more.
Well, we're delighted you're here, Quinella. Thank you so much. Kathleen, my neighbor at the last evening's board meeting. Would you like to say hi?
Yes, hi. I wanted to come because I'm the chair of the Consumer Affairs and Licensing Committee, and we have some areas that sort of touch. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Delighted you could be here tonight, Kathleen. Thank you. Adam, would you like to say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone. Similar to Kathleen, I'm on the transportation committee, and there's definitely public safety aspects to that as well. So just here to listen.
Well, really, really delighted you're here as well, and thank you all. This is a time-consuming enterprise, and we're really very appreciative that you could be with us this evening. If there are members of the public who are not the board, we will give you an opportunity to speak or ask questions later on in the meeting. But we will dive into the business at hand. Unfortunately, at relatively late notice, we did hear from the 114th precinct that they would not be able to send a member of their community affairs unit this evening. That is a disappointment, and we will make sure to reschedule. And we will talk a little bit later about, hopefully, about frequency of meetings and then future topics. What it does allow, however, is time for a deeper discussion of the capital and expense budgetary items. So we'll dive into that for a second. But before I do that, Frank, is there anything you'd like to add or that I may have forgotten in my nervousness about my first time chairing this committee?
No, I think great agenda, and it makes sense to pivot without the 114th representation, and we'll be sure to follow up and make sure we can get that for a future meeting. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. It seems like we don't have any public members, but Abdel Razak, for your benefit and at the advice of the chair, I'm going to share a document which is really a reference guide for how community boards make these decisions and make these recommendations. And as our district manager Florence just reminded me, this is a wish list. Our choosing these items or ranking these items does not by any means mean that they will be funded. But it is important that the voices of the residents of Community Board 1, of whom we are representatives, be heard. So I'm very quickly going to share a little bit about the reference guide. This is a publicly accessible document. And this kind of gives an overview of what types of needs and what types of requests can be made. So you can see that NYPD facilities and equipment are obviously very important and are things that come up very, very often. These tend to be capital expenses. That means expenses for building projects, for renovations, for infrastructure. I will not, I guess I should share my screen. That would probably be the first thing that would be most helpful. Forgive the nerves, folks. Let me see here. I am having a hard time seeing where I share my screen here. Let me see. All right, let me see. Okay, I am not able to see the bottom bar, and I'm having a difficult time with that.
Run your mouse over the bottom, Chris. It'll help you to see the bottom bar.
Yeah, it's partly obscured for some reason, Florence. I appreciate that.
Reach Studios, you gave him co-host, right?
Yeah, I definitely was co-host. Let me see here. Here we go. All right, let me see if I can find the items. Still not getting that. Bear with me for a second. All right, let's see. Window. Entire screen. Chrome tab. Here we go. All right. Apologies. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, great. So again, I will not go through the entire list, but under the area of public safety, you can see facilities and equipment. There are several items that you will see on our list when we go through it shortly. Facilities and equipment, as I said, are capital expenses. Those are for building, often for equipment, for infrastructure items. And then we can see particular NYPD programs, and those tend to be expense. And you can see even under each bullet point, it does tell you whether it would fall under a capital expense or a program expense. Program expenses are for personnel, or for specific activities, as opposed to the construction of facilities or the purchase of equipment for facilities. And then we have New York Police Department staff and training resources. There's a pretty detailed list there as well. But our committee does not only deal with police-related budgetary items. It also very much works with emergency services and fire department related items. And again, you can see Fire Department of New York facilities of equipment, most of that would fall under capital, and then programs and staffing, most of which would fall under expense. So this is just a broad overview of the types of things which can be requested. And the reason why I think that is important is, even though we are going to go through a list which is based on last year's requests, there is room and there is a mechanism by which new requests can be made. And this meeting tonight is most certainly a great opportunity for folks to do that. So I am going to stop sharing that document. Any questions, comments so far about what we've gone through? And again, Frank, I invite you to certainly join in and add anything that I may have forgotten.
Yeah, happy to hear from folks, and I can reflect some notes I have from last night, which we heard from the broader community during the open hearing.
Any other thoughts from other attendees before we dive into our fairly detailed spreadsheet? Frank, did you want to share those thoughts now, or did you want to wait till later in the process? Whatever works best for you.
Sure, happy to.
Sorry, I have my son here.
No worries. I'm happy to just earmark a couple of the things we heard, just to bring it in so that when we see those things pop up, we can make space for it. There was concerns around safety in parks, in particular, just around bathrooms, around perhaps a lack of services being provided for those experiencing homelessness, and how that can affect the experience of both those people experiencing homelessness and the other citizens using said park. I didn't fully understand the issue around the school consolidation, and it sounded like it had public safety themes, but that part I was unsure of. There was issues around illegal parking under the MTA bridge, or not the MTA, excuse me, the whatever, that Metro North Bridge.
The Amtrak bridge, I believe.
Yes, excuse me. And then there's also expressed some concerns around the police presence on Steinway Street, and how the neighbors there were experiencing that, perhaps as feeling overly surveyed or over surveillance. And there was questions about a domestic violence shelter, which of course falls out of our purview, but obviously we're upstream of what services domestic violence survivors get connected to through folks like the NYPD. So these are a couple of themes we heard last night, and we just can keep these in the back of our head as we reflect not only on our own personal positions on this, but also the neighbors we represent. So happy to dive into it with that. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Frank. So I will now share the spreadsheet, which one of the co-chairs of the budget committee, I know that's not the right name, has shared with us. This is based on last year's, and I'll share it now. And we'll start with the last year's capital requests, which are fairly limited. I believe there are only 2, but they are both quite significant in scope and potential expense. So let's see how lucky I get here with doing this in a little better fashion than I did for the last one. Let's see. I'll do something really quick. Bear with me. I'm just going to save this to my desktop because it's not allowing me to do that. All right. Now I can open this up. All right. Let's try one more time. There we go. All right. So let's go to our capital expense, and it's conveniently alphabetized, I think. Yes. All right. Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Frank. All right. So there are two items, both important, but also very, very significant potentially in scope and expense. So the first, of course, would be the construction of a new 114th precinct. This is an item that has certainly been brought up by many, many members. I won't read all of the text, but I encourage you to take a moment and do so. It is an old building. They have been suffering particular problems with flooding and sewage backup during heavy rains, which, as you can imagine, is not conducive to a good working environment and also has public health and individual health repercussions. It does say here that the New York Police Department is this was last year's agency response. The New York Police Department is working with the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget to secure capital funds for facility improvements. And if you go back here, it is ranked number 5. And here, Florence, I will ask for your input. Does that mean it was ranked number 5 out of all the items in total that came out of the Community Board 1, or just out of this committee?
It's out of the committees do not rank individually. It's off the entire list. A capital budget has 32 items and it's number 5 of 32. So what happens in previous years is new items go on the bottom, and at the October meeting, the entire board looks at the layout, and if something needs to be re-ranked as a team, the entire board re-ranks. Committees don't re-rank individually.
Thank you for that, Florence. That was very helpful. And as you can all see, I'm learning the process as we go. So Frank, just confirming that you're taking notes in terms of rankings and folks' kind of opinions on continuing to emphasize, de-emphasize, or move on.
Yep,
yeah.
I was just saying, I've got I'm going to be taking notes in a Google Doc, and I can distribute or share it with you afterwards for distribution.
Oh, I love people who are living in the 21st century as opposed to me, who refuses to do so. So thank you for that, Frank. Any thoughts, comments on and I'm going to, as we have a very small meeting with only a couple of committee members here, I would encourage members of Community Board 1 who are not on this committee to feel free to share your thoughts and comments. Does this remain a high priority?
Yeah, this is Daniel. This issue with the police station has been on our list since I joined the board 20 years ago. It seems to be an ongoing thing, and it does. I think it needs attention. Certainly, simply because it's certainly been on the list for all these years. It's not disappeared. It's community members over 20 years that I know of have ranked this thing pretty high on the list. The other thing, I wanted to add something to our list. Obviously, it'll go at the bottom of the list, but additional, accessible, for lack of a better term, traffic lights in Astoria. As you know, we're short on the lights that make sound when the light turns green or red.
Well, that's helpful, and that might be something that might come out of the Transportation Committee, but that does not mean we cannot take note of it and add it to the list. So thank you so much for that, Daniel.
Yeah, well, it is a safety issue. I mean, if you
without a doubt,
across the street, you're going to get hit by a car, and there you go.
No question. Yep. And obviously, the NYPD does play a role in monitoring traffic and safety enforcement. So that's a very, very, and it's one that I agree with. Absolutely.
So a reflection. I'll go for it.
I'm sorry. This is Quinella. I agree with Daniel. But did they ever think about getting a new building for the 114th precinct? Because now that we have a lot of new neighbors, all these new buildings coming up, maybe they need more police officers and try to get a larger building?
What I know about the situation is that the building was built over a stream, an old stream that when it's not raining, the stream doesn't have any water. And when it rains, the stream fills and you get a flood. It was just poor location for the building, or they just never sealed off the stream underneath there. But that's what it is. And so a new building in that same spot, if that issue weren't addressed, they'd have the same problem.
Right. That's a very good point.
No, when I say new building, like a new location in Astoria.
So do you mean, Quinella, purchasing an existing building and converting that into a new precinct?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I am not an expert on design and construction, nor I am frankly an expert yet on the needs of the police department. I imagine there are special design needs in terms of holding facilities and all of the other stuff, but I think we could certainly make a note of that as an option. And I think if it could be done, the police department would be happy to have that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Quick general reflection and a note on this item. The general reflection, thank you, Daniel, for bringing up the crosswalks. And I think a key thing we're going to notice here as a theme in public safety is that actually public safety is such a very broad set of interests. And yet the way that a lot of this is organizationally designed is by agency or department of the city. And so at times we will be hearing and fielding things that are very much public safety oriented, but may not be NYPD oriented. And so we're going to take those, collect them from the community and pass them on to other groups that might be better able to advocate just because the government bureaucracy doesn't align with the citizen experience. And we recognize that gap exists. Second thing I'll say is a big +1 on the new precinct. I used to live near there. A complaint we've heard at the community board that I've experienced personally is the absolute mayhem that are the sidewalks, because the Leos park their cars on the sidewalks. It makes it like if you have strollers, it's just getting by that building is very hard for cars, for people, for strollers, for everyone. So imagining a situation where maybe they've got like a taller building and they've got parking underneath or something like that could be a huge unlock for creating more space for the surrounding streets for the needs that people identified there. So reflecting something I've heard from past board meetings.
That's an important observation and comment. So thank you, Frank. Any other thoughts or comments or general? This was ranked quite high. Do folks feel like it should overall remain, again, not having a full sense of what the other items were in order? Do folks feel this is still a very high priority of the committee?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether you feel there is a need for more policing, or what your thoughts are about the state of policing in the district, I do think a state-of-the-art facility that is responsive to the changing needs of the community and which does not flood with sewage is probably a high priority. So if there are no other thoughts on that, let's go to this.
So I'm sending the chef.
Chris, Ness has his hand up.
Okay, I apologize.
I have a question also.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out why I can't. Can you still see the spreadsheet?
Yep.
Okay. So I am having a weird situation where there are kind of panels on the top of my Zoom screen that's not allowing me to see who is raising their hand. So Shahnaz, thank you for that. And if folks could help me make sure that I'm not skipping anybody, please keep doing so. So who was that who had a comment?
Nas has his hand up.
Hey,
Nas, please. Sorry about that.
No worries. First off,
and thank you for joining. I know you came in a little late. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. I'm over at Transportation Committee if we haven't met or spoken before. But first of all, I want to thank you, Chris and Frank, for spearheading this kind of like revitalized public safety committee, because this is definitely a new format where hopefully we'll actually be meeting and actually discussing stuff and having conversations. And I really don't want to take up too much time because I'm not on the committee myself, but I think what Frank said is excellent in that, you know, being on the board for a while as well as a public member, as just a member of the public as well, you know, I think there's a lot of, and understandably so, a lot of people that are like, hey, this thing's wrong, let's get NYPD on it. And I think what we see happening is like, yeah, you know, probably we ask NYPD too many things that they are not capable of helping in the best way possible. So I just hope that now that we have this committee meeting, that you know, public safety is not just police presence, it's, you know, homeless outreach,
Yes.
it's social services, things like this. So as you continue to discuss capital expense items, you know, it's going to be refreshing, I imagine, based on what you've said, to see, okay, let's think about public safety more holistically. Yes, NYPD is one element of that, but it is not the end all be all. So I'm looking forward to attending more of these meetings and participating in a healthy conversation on what safety means for the community. So thanks, guys. And yeah, I would also just chime in that, like, the precinct probably should not be at that physical location, just because the nature of like day-to-day activity, whether that's vehicles leaving or entering the station, is just, I mean, it being on a service road is kind of insane. On top of the sidewalk issues, which are very long-standing, and whatever plumbing, sewage issues they have. So like, yeah, exploration of a new site is probably a pretty good idea there.
That's very helpful, and thank you. I think there is an overall agreement that we completely support and respect our police and their facilities needs, but that we do want this committee to be much more holistic. As you know, there were folks at the meeting from the public who spoke about real concerns around policing, and we want to make sure that all sides and that all perspectives vis-a-vis public safety are taken into account. At the end of this process, we do want to hear from all of you, whether you're on the committee or not, about what kind of topics and speakers we'd like to have moving forwards. We will reschedule the precinct, but who else would we like to hear from? So thank you for that. All right. Now I'm going to, is there anybody else with their hand raised? I'm so sorry. My screen is acting wonky.
I believe Daniel said he want to say something.
Yes, please. Thank you, Daniel.
There we go, unmuted. Yeah, I want to say something else, and I'm not sure about it, but I believe the cells where they detain the prisoners temporarily is in the basement, and so I think that's more than a safety issue. That's a human whatever
rights issue.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you're sitting in a cell, it's bad enough you're sitting in the cell, and now this other stuff comes floating by.
Absolutely. Whether it's, and I know it's not intentional, but absolutely, there's a human rights issue there. There's a public health issue there. There's even a liability issue there. So there's all kinds of factors going around there. Absolutely.
Yep.
Thanks, Daniel. Anybody else?
Welcome.
Okay, I do want to move to the second. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Let me see. This is still being shared, right? The spreadsheet. We do have a second item, which is also quite significant under public safety, and this is the reopening of the firehouse, which contains ladder 261. Oh no, that's not right. Ladder 116. I think there's a ladder. There's the firehouse. Let's just say that at 3720 29th Street. I am going to ask folks who live closer to this facility. As you know, I am on this board representing resettlement, which is in the far south of the community board, but apparently it has been closed a while. And it does seem, based upon the explanation of the request, that given the exponential growth in terms of housing and business and everything in Astoria and within the community board, that there could be a real need for an additional firehouse, and there was one that folks would like to be reopened. The agency response is further study by the agency of this request is needed. So that's where we are. Any comments, thoughts, or opinions about this? This was ranked number 12, still rather high in the overall rankings from last year.
Does anyone have any context as to why they were advocating for that? I see that there's like a general. So I suppose the question I'm asking, do we know that people have actually experienced a deterioration in service as a result of this lack? Like, because I understand there's kind of like whether or not this is open is different than what's the problem it needs to solve. And it sounds like it could improve service, but have we actually heard any complaints? Has anyone ever called in and said it took the fire department too long to respond to anything? Because I haven't heard anything regarding, I've heard actually no complaints about the fire department. None of those have been raised to us. Florence, I'm just curious, do you have, and maybe since we're new.
I'm writing in the chat.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Gave you the history. So basically, this fire department is in the Dutch Kills vicinity of our district. We have some 32 homeless shelters being used for our new neighbors, 32 hotels being used for our new neighbors in our community who are migrating to the United States. This fire department was closed many years ago. The residents of that area want that firehouse open. Our district also services Roosevelt Island. So our police and our firefighters and our EMS go there. So even having one firehouse down is a negative aspect for our community. And this was a residential request from the former president of Dutch Kills Civic Association.
Got it. So it's through an intermediary organization. Super helpful. Thank you.
And that's great context. Thank you so much, Florence. Any thoughts? Comments?
May I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I can't find my little raise hand button, but
I couldn't see it anyway, Kathleen, even if you did. So thank you for speaking up.
We used to live 3 or 4 blocks away from there, and I believe when it was initially shut down, it was during a budget crisis period. And the fact that there is more population than ever in that particular part of Astoria, and that I don't believe Roosevelt Island has its own full strength firehouse. I think that at this point, the more people that you have, the more you do need the firehouse. I remember it being shut down in the early 2000s.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Kathleen. Again, keeping in mind that I cannot see your electronic raised hands, is there anybody who has any thoughts about the reopening of the firehouse?
I can let you know about raised hands. I don't see any other raised hands right now.
Yeah, Dan Aliberti is here.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes,
one of the things is that the firehouse was shut down around the same time that they started having fire personnel go out the same time as an ambulance was sent out, because they felt that fire trucks get there quicker than ambulances do. So they sent out fire trucks every time an ambulance went out. And so it gave a bit more work for those firefighters, because now they're going out on EMS calls as well as firefighting calls. And so their job has gotten more complicated and many more runs, but not fire runs.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, it seems to me that I don't think anybody in this room would be opposed to reopening a firehouse. I think part of the discussion is how sort of overall important do folks think it is in terms of overall district needs.
Sounds pretty high, but I do see we have a hand from Quinella.
Yes, thank you, Quinella.
No problem. I think it's definitely needed, but is there any way you can find out if the study, like if the study has been completed?
We can certainly do our best. Absolutely.
Yeah,
You
but
mean
I
in
think it's a
terms
good, I think it's a good
of
idea.
increased wait times for services from the FDNY?
That, and if it proves that additional firehouse is actually needed, maybe that would help.
Absolutely. Of course.
Awesome.
Thank
Great
you.
idea.
Thanks, Quinella.
I don't see any other hands, so for sake of time, should we keep on trucking?
One more quickie.
There we
Yeah,
go.
please, Dan.
Just the fact that the firehouse was placed there when the population of the entire area was so much smaller, and now we've gotten so much bigger, it's like a no-brainer that we're going to need more fire protection now that we have more people.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. There's not. It's hard to argue with that logic. So I absolutely agree with that. All right, so we are going to move to the other tab. Those were the two capital items. There is a longer list of expense items under public safety. So I'm hoping, while not in any way discouraging robust discussion, that we can get through these tonight, because we also want to hear about new. We've heard one, but we also might want to hear about other additional public safety needs. I want to acknowledge Mariam, who is a public attendee. Thank you for joining us. As we are a small group, in my capacity as chair, I am inviting anyone who is on this call to give feedback on these items. So please feel free to do so, and we're delighted you're here. All right. So from the expense, again, expense are people and programs as opposed to buildings and physical structures for the most part. We have a pretty high rated one. The upgrade of fire equipment permanent generators in each firehouse in Community Board 1. I'm going to let you all take a look at the, rather than reading out the text. I think it's pretty clear what that means. Firehouses are one of the first lines of support during a time when overall power might be out. So it is essential that generators are up to date and working most optimally. The agency response looks like pure bureaucracy here. Must be scheduled carefully. These requests must be prioritized. I think that's pretty clear, but I would certainly welcome at this point any comments, thoughts. This was pretty highly ranked, as I said, number 5. Again,
Just
I apologize. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say a quick point of information. I believe that permanent generators would fall under CapEx versus OpEx. I see this is on the expense budget, but I'm wondering if this might need to be filed differently, just given that it's literally is a capital expenditure.
It does look like it. I'm not sure if there's a reason why. There might be some reason why this. I'm sorry.
For the chair, Florence here.
Yes,
FDNY
please,
asked
Florence.
for this. FDNY asked for this on this list. If there was a need to move it to the other list, they would have noted it in the response.
Okay. I think we should, however, note as a committee that this does seem like more of a capital request than a program one. But thank you for that context, Florence. That's helpful. Thoughts, comments, questions, ideas about its ranking in the overall. Again, these are rankings overall for the entire Community Board 1 in the air, not just public safety.
I have a question, and it may be a Florence question. This strikes me also a bit like inside baseball. I feel like a everyday citizen wouldn't know that your local firehouse needs a generator. I'm curious if this was submitted from the fire department or if this was based off citizen, citizen experience. Because I do think it's important to separate self-advocacy of people within certain agencies, which we can still advocate for, versus the interests presented to us from the general public.
So every year, every single district manager in the city of New York attends what are called capital budget consultations. Each district manager meets with every single New York City agency. When we are at the capital and budget expense meetings, we advocate for all of the complaints for the community. So if we have complaints with the police service, the fire service, as the constituents call in, maybe we're having problems with certain roads and we have to complain with DOT. That's how we got the bike lane on the RFK bridge by the district managers advocating during capital expense budget. So what happens is while we're there at the end of the meeting, we will ask the agencies, what does your agency need? Then we will come back. We will inform the chair if we don't have the ask on the list, and then it will go to the bottom of the list. Then in October, you, the board members, will restructure the list and you will place it where you want it on the list. But all new items usually have gone in the past at the bottom of the list.
So
Understood.
just to clarify, this is to long story short, this has come from
Yes,
that
budget
department.
consultations. That's what I was explaining. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a way or a mechanism, Florence, without getting too sidetracked, to differentiate between requests that come from the public at large, that is residents, as opposed to the
Never happened in the past. I would guess if you as members wanted to do it, there would be a way to find how to do it, but it's never happened on capital expense budgets. I've never seen any board do that.
Okay, good to know, though. Thank you so much. I do want to keep the floor open for any other additional thoughts or comments about the generators. I'm hearing sort of a not indifferent. These are all important things, but not a lot of strong feelings either way. Is that a safe characterization? Okay, we'll move on, and this might be someplace where Kathleen might want to chime in. The next line 52, increase consumer affairs evening inspectors, particularly around nightlife. I know that came up at last night's board meeting. It comes up at almost every board meeting, as we know. It is a big quality of life issue, balancing the needs for entertainment and robust kind of hospitality businesses with the need for people to be able to get to sleep and have a reasonable quality of life. And then I'm not sure what this language under explanation of request has to do with marches, but maybe somebody can fill me in. I don't know what that means.
Would you like me to explain it?
Yes, please, Florence. That's very helpful. We always appreciate your context.
With regard to the Consumer Affairs Committee, a lot of the items that come through the office are called constituent complaints. So you go to ABC, I'll use an old place. There was a place called Aces here in Astoria. It was a very traumatic place for the community. It took 5 years to get them in line and finally have their liquor license removed from them. The reason the liquor license was moved was because of multi-agency responses. Those used to be known as marches, M-A-R-C-H. So the Consumer Affairs evening inspectors would go out with, in the old days, it was the Department of Consumer Affairs, NYPD, FDNY, the health department, and the buildings department. They would go to a nightlife establishment and they would evaluate the service and the quality of business. They would look at the fire extinguishers. They would look at the dual exits. They would make sure they weren't pouring alcohol into bottles, so you wouldn't be buying a Patron and actually drink Smirnoffs, that kind of a thing.
Understood. Okay.
And this is to protect the quality of life for the residents of the community. These inspectors are invaluable. There's no amount of money you can put on them.
Right. And these inspectors also deal with, just like to use the language on the spreadsheet, bad actors in every way. So
yes.
Totally. Thank you. I was unclear about this acronym or this term marches. Thank you for that.
Multi-agency responses.
Yep. Thank you so much. And then you can see they basically said we don't have the money for it last year, but anybody want to comment? Again, I do not see electronic raised hands, so Frank could moderate that if that's okay.
No hands. It looks like Kathleen has a comment. Go for it.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to piggyback on Florence's statements that it can take a very long time to get a bad actor out of the neighborhood, and having more enforcement of people who go on a regular basis um, basically encourages them to be the good neighbors that we need them to be. And also, they can do something more quickly if they spot something that is illegal or not according to the way they are supposed to be operating. So, this kind of enforcement ends up making overall Astoria better. And because we are sort of a destination neighborhood for a lot of people from out of the neighborhood, it is sometimes necessary to basically keep the people who live here feeling safe and not disturbed in the middle of the night.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kathleen. Any other comments that I can, or raised hands that I cannot see? Please feel free to just jump in if you need to. Well, I'm going to give my opinion here. I think given what I've been hearing at almost every meeting since the beginning of my time on this board, this is a very, very high priority and should remain so.
Here, here.
Comments, thoughts before we move on?
Just agreement for me.
Great. All right, so let's go to line 53 on this document. Also pretty highly ranked, right below the last 9. Funding for expansion of CPR programs, staffing and training in CD1. Very, very important. I know at my organization, Resettlement, we have periodic CPR trainings for participants, for staff, and for the public at large, which are often conducted by FDNY. I do want to make a distinct note of the agency response, which says that the FDNY Foundation provides funds to assist the department in meeting these needs. So I urge folks to keep that in mind in terms of overall prioritization, since there does seem to be another consistent and sustainable funding source. Thoughts, comments, questions?
My only thought, and I was trying to give room for others because I know I've been speaking up a lot. So please, anyone, don't hesitate to speak up. My only thought is if there is non-public funding, or like if there's a funding source that doesn't have to go through this, that would signal to me this could be a thing that's a low priority. Because ultimately, most of what we've talked about so far has been high priority, so we need to put something as low priority.
We need to do some moving around. I agree. We don't know how much of it is privately funded, but I absolutely agree with you, Frank. Okay. I'm not hearing a whole lot of clamor to keep or raise the CPR classes higher in the rankings for those of you who don't know, by the way, I just learned this myself. The chairs of all the committees will get together before, and Florence, please feel free to, or anyone else to chime in, to kind of work on preparing for the ranking, we'll do the ranking, and then that's presented to the full board at the next meeting. Do I have that right, Florence?
We haven't scheduled a meeting yet. I just shot out an email to Amy and Corrine tonight. Usually you come to the meeting presenting new items that you have and any items that you wish to remove, and the entire board ranks together. I've never seen board members in the past rank prior to a meeting.
Understood.
It's usually done together as a team, but it's a new generation of leadership. So that could very easily change depending on how our chair feels about this.
Yeah, I did not get the sense that the chair wanted us to actually rank or re-rank tonight or at any of these meetings, but just to give general sort of up arrow, flat arrow, down arrow. That's my own jargon, but that's sort of that was my understanding as well. Okay. And keeping in public safety, another important item is the hiring or provision of crossing guards, which would be Community Board 1, which overlaps largely with Queens School District 30. Obviously, there are a lot of schools. There are more and more residents many of which have young and growing families of young people who are going to the schools. I think there's some more bureaucratic response from the agency. It sounds like, at least on last year, there may have been vacancies that were already budgeted for, that is, unfilled positions. So that might have affected whether or not additional funding was allocated. And this kind of is related, at least, to Daniel's earlier recommendation about additional stoplights, and street lights, crossing lights.
May I say something? If I can say something, last night Mrs. Koger came to the meeting, and she is someone who has basically all the confidence of all the residents of Astoria houses. And since she pointed out that with the additional construction, it makes it more hazardous for children to cross the street, I think it's essential that we get more crossing guards, especially down by where all the new buildings are going up.
Absolutely. I think Ms. Kroger's testimony was very, very impactful. So I agree with you on that. Any other thoughts?
I just think that one should be placed very high because we want our kids protected when they cross the street. But I think it should definitely stay there, and I think it should be ranked a little higher.
I'm in agreement, Quinella. Other thoughts on ranking before we move on to the next one? Okay. Next would be an increase in uniformed personnel in the 114th precinct. Uniformed personnel, I assume, I know it means more police officers. Rank 24. Obviously, the response is true, that that's part of an overall executive budgeting process. I actually was surprised, regardless of my personal opinion, that this wasn't ranked a little bit higher, but because I wasn't involved last year. But I'd love to hear thoughts on the request for additional police officers, i.e. uniformed personnel within the 114th precinct.
I'd actually love to tap on public member Mariam, or not, so she's not a member of the committee, but a public member
Attendee.
of the public present,
Yep.
attendee Mariam, because I know she gave a statement last night on this topic, so I wanted to invite her to share if she would like.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Frank. I actually disagree with the motion to include more uniformed officers at the 114, specifically because the implementation of increased uniformed officers only criminalizes any. We know that, or I'm not sure if everyone here knows, but Egyptians, Muslims, Palestinians, and most of the Middle East is currently listed as ancestries of interest to the NYPD, which means that we are getting a lot more unnecessary surveillance. And considering what has happened over the past almost year with the ongoing genocide in Palestine, this ancestry of interest topic has only increased a lot of preconceived notions about Egyptians, Palestinians, Muslims, and anyone who does identify under those categories. I know just an example of this: on October 16th, there was a protest on Steinway Street in strong opposition to the ongoing genocide, but the NYPD, especially Community Affairs Officer Harris M. Hamid, was very unnecessarily violent with regards to how the protest was handled. With thousands of people already lined up on Steinway Street, ready to protest, the NYPD only created a larger hazard by telling us to kind of disperse towards the end of the protest, and that dispersal while we were following orders given by the 114. A lot of unnecessary arrests were carried out. People were hurt. A lot of a minor was eventually taken into the 114. And this is an example of how increased police presence can pose as an endangerment to people who are a part of the community on Steinway Street. We also know and understand that as of or after 2001, surveillance against Muslims like myself and Palestinians, especially like myself, was increased. In accordance with the Patriot Act, there was actually a camera that was pointing directly towards Masjid al-Iman, which is a mosque that Muslims typically go to for prayer or for any religious activity. The Muslim activity there was also criminalized. And in addition to this, our taxpayer dollars go towards surveilling Muslims and protesters and basically anyone who falls into the ancestries of interest by the NYPD. Over $8.5 million has been spent on surveillance within the past year. We've had the NYPD used 13 separate uses of drones being dispatched at different protests since October 28th. And we have also seen racist and preconceived and a lot of assaults done by the SRG and the anti-terrorist unit that are both racially motivated, which poses an endangerment to the indigenous communities and the enclaves that currently live on Steinway Street and have been living on Steinway Street for longer than officers have been serving at the 114. Just to give you guys an example, Harris M. Hamid started his service in January of 2026. He has 3 complaints and 5 allegations. Most of these allegations compose of an abuse of authority, either concerning stop and frisk, and or assault that were both placed in 2014, 2011. The most recent allegation being placed in 2014 for an abuse of authority over a vehicle search. So if all of our officers, or if most of our officers at the 114 are exhibiting the behavior that is consistent with racism and xenophobia, and if most of these officers do kind of align with increased surveillance of Muslims, Palestinians, and other ancestors of interest that are categorized by the NYPD, I don't think it is a smart decision to have these officers or increase police presence at the 114 or in their jurisdiction, because it only increases unnecessary surveillance of Muslim agency, and it makes people really uncomfortable.
Miriam, I think we're losing you. But I think we've captured the main points of.
They're afraid that they will take it and profiling.
I don't know if it's my internet or your internet.
Sorry,
there's a one connection, Miriam. We're having we got most of it, but towards the end you started.
We can't hear you.
That's okay, as long as you got my main points.
No, and I think this is exactly why it's important to have members of the public. And I want to stress, Miriam, to be very clear, I was not making a motion. My role is to facilitate and go through the entire list. So I'm trying to be as impartial as possible. So I really, really appreciate your input and your comments.
So next we have Nas. He has his hand up. And then after that, Kathleen.
So yeah, just to echo the sentiment I spoke to and Frank spoke to earlier, with that context, I would say, you know, one of the things that, I don't know, I guess you guys have now been on the board for quite a bit of time. You know, a very common complaint or concern is regarding unhoused neighbors, and or mentally disturbed individuals. And, you know, I think over the years, we've seen the conversation improve a lot compared to where it was before. But you know, again, this particular conversation has largely revolved around police, who are not necessarily going to have all the tools necessary for de-escalation and things like of that nature. So I would say, I would hope to see, and granted, I'm not a committee member, but just my 2 cents here. You know, I would rather see increased funding for social workers. That's, I feel like, has almost never been discussed at the community board, especially because of the fact that public safety really didn't meet very often. So yeah, I would just say in the context of that, I would prefer to see more social workers. That's all.
I think that's great, and I think we should add that to the list as a new item. Culturally, linguistically competent social workers whose role is to interact with the community, who are not necessarily on the payroll, not necessarily who are not on the payroll of the New York City Police Department, and who can deal with a lot of the incidents that or challenges that may come up in the community. So thank you for that, Naz. Frank, who was next? I'm sorry again.
Yeah, we got Kathleen. and then I might jump in after that. Kathleen, you're up. Go for it.
I'm unmuting. Okay. Well, one thing I'd like to note is that every year in the city budget, by far the largest line item is for the police department. Therefore, I think they can always come up with funds for more bodies on the streets. But I do appreciate that the training is not there for people to de-escalate, for people to act appropriately with other cultures, so that the more projects they can have, and I think this is where we can stand up, where they do use either social workers or members of the community that is being patrolled to make things, have them treated better as any other citizen. I think that's really more where we can advocate, because I don't think the police department needs any more money.
It's a good point. Thanks, Kathleen.
I'll hold off on mine, and because I see another hand, Shahnaz, feel free to speak.
Yes, I understand the people like about the police officer, because all the time we have a lot of people feeling police officer against us. I don't agree with this. Police officer is doing their job and they save us, but in the same time they need more training. That's the lack I feeling is like we have a gap. If they get more training and they get more educated, they will be able to treat us more professional. But if they not have training, and because they have to have more than one shift to cover, because I went to the academy, I get the training with them. First, they not have enough police officer. And some police officers have to cover more than one shift. And if I have to cover more than one shift, I'm not going to do the correct job, because my brain is not working as like normal. If I'm a person has to do 8 hours, now I'm doing 16 hours, and sometimes maybe more than all these hours. Is not correct. Maybe when you have a more police officer and educated and training, and maybe they see more social worker with this, I think we're going to have better city. Thank you.
So I'm hearing an emphasis on training as opposed and not necessarily an emphasis on bodies on the street. So thank you for that, Shahnaz.
I want to add to that, please.
Yeah, I'll let Daniel go next. Go for Daniel.
Yeah, I attended the police academy also about 10 years ago. Now I don't know if things have changed recently, but there was no attention given to cultural sensitivity or disability sensitivity or any of that kind of stuff. It just wasn't in the training. And yeah, training is important, and maybe no additional officers, but the ones that we have do need more training for sure.
Thank you. I'm happy to reflect a few thoughts on this. One, I would agree with Chris. I see a bifurcation. The line item says it says did we scroll past it?
Let me go back. Sorry, let me go back.
Yeah.
Sorry. Trying to keep us on track.
Uniform personnel, and so if I think if we instead made it more clear that instead of that could be Leo or non-Leo, and anyone familiar, law enforcement officer versus other uniformed personnel, I think it would be a great opportunity for us perhaps to reflect what seems to be a growing interest in the community, which is other forms of uniformed personnel that are not necessarily law enforcement officers. So that's one thing I've captured in my notes. The second, of course, is the training issue. And I think the training issue has two unlocks. Number one, of course, we all have people give individual examples here. Secondarily, I also know the city's spending up to $300 million a year in lawsuits. And I feel like we could afford, for instance, other services more effectively if we weren't losing hundreds of millions in lawsuits that probably could be avoided if we had that better training. And as a final point, I've heard some of these complaints in other parts of Astoria, not just, I know we heard about Steinway, but also in some of our Section 8 housing and the communities who live in those spaces have also expressed to me at different moments feelings of over-policing. While simultaneously, I've also heard complaints of response times. And so improving response times doesn't necessarily mean you have to have more Leos. It's the thing I want to break down. And I think we've done that here pretty well. So in our notes, I've broken those down into those 3 pieces.
That's extremely helpful.
I see Miriam's hand back up, and then I just want to note we intended on wrapping in 20 minutes. We will go until we get it done, I think. Chris, I don't want to
but we should, after Miriam's comment, if it's okay, I think we should move to the next item on the list.
Yes, thank you. Miriam, floor is yours if you would like to speak one more time.
Thanks so much for giving me the floor, Frank. I did want to say, just in response to the last person that spoke about the last people that spoke about the academy, I do know that over the past close to a year, every single time I did come in contact with a uniformed officer, I was racially slandered and at one point called a terrorist. So I would appreciate if in any advance in training that the NYPD does receive, especially with
Hello?
I believe we lost her.
Hello?
Oh, I think she's no longer in the call. I think she accidentally hung up.
I know she was having trouble logging in. I want to make one really, really quick comment, Frank, if I could.
Floor is you're the chair. You get to make all the comments you want.
But you've been doing, because I can't see folks, you've been doing an amazing job of moderating and facilitating. From the perspective of public housing, that is the Queensbridge and Ravenswood and Astoria houses, this bifurcation is extremely clear. Many older residents, elderly residents want more police officers. Many of our younger residents, almost all of color, feel that there is over-policing. It can be very, very hard to balance and judge those two impulses, which almost seem like they're at odds with one another. I wanted to throw that into this very complicated equation from the perspective of the housing police as well, what we call PSA 9. Marion, we lost you for a second, but we'd love to hear the rest of your thoughts.
Thank you so much. Sorry, my connection is really inconsistent.
Yeah, it's been a little wonky tonight.
It's great.
Sorry. I was going to say that over the past year, I've been called a terrorist by multiple police officers. I've also been at the receiving end of brutal force during several protests that I was a part of on Steinway Street. And so I do believe that whatever training the NYPD currently receives now is more so geared towards enforcing the maximum amount of force possible on people who are just simply trying to exercise their First Amendment right. And I think that adding more uniformed police officers is going to exacerbate that, and we're just going to see more force exhibited on people. And I would really appreciate that in whatever cultural sensitivity training that is currently given to police officers, that they kind of veer away from the ancestry of interest that I brought up earlier in my comments. I really do believe that if we kind of increase and expand cultural sensitivity training to the NYPD, and we stress that sects of the NYPD, like the SRG and anti-terrorism unit, dial down on their racism, then maybe we'll see a more positive relationship between people who are on Steinway Street, for instance, and other enclaves around Queens, especially around the 114th jurisdiction. We'll see a lot more positive relationships. So I feel like the relationship that we currently have now with the NYPD, especially among the youth, is a really negative one, considering that every single opportunity we do have to protest, we oftentimes have to anticipate a really forceful NYPD response to a simple gathering. So I don't know if that can. Thank you,
Miriam.
I
want to take a moment in my capacity as chair. There's not much you can say to hear about these horrible things that have happened to you, other than that we're really sorry that they happened. And we hear your voice, and we're going to do everything we can to incorporate that into the recommendations that come out of this committee. So I want to thank you for that, for being so vulnerable and for sharing that with us. I really do mean that.
I have something.
Yeah, and then after that, Dan, we have to move on to the next.
Sure. I don't know if the Citizen Police Academy is still happening, but if it is, I believe a few of us should go down there and in person see what the training's all about. Because what it was I believe we did 8 or 12 weeks, one night a week or one day a week. We went down to the police training center and sat in the classes with the police officers.
It's a great suggestion, and one that
it's still happening. Is it still happening?
It is? Really? Great. I'm going to sign up for it.
I think that's a great first step to get them to change if it's not where it needs to be, and I have a feeling it's not. to get them to change that and adapt that training. So thank you for that recommendation.
And if anyone's got a link, feel free to put it in the chat, because I would love to. I've never heard of that before. I'd love to check it out.
Me too. Line 56, the purchase of a bariatrics ambulance. This one's a little more straightforward. This is about, now bariatric, I thought bariatric had to do with smoke inhalation. Am I totally off here?
I think bariatric is where you're in a pressurized chamber.
Yeah,
it can be used for smoking. My father-in-law was in a bariatric chamber recently, but for like something unrelated.
Right. So you can see the request. It was number 31. And the response was that an amount was given to the FDNY, and then they decide how to use it. And that must mean that this was not one of the items for which they chose to use their allocation. While I think it's important to have one, I don't have any particular strong opinion on this. Does anybody have any comment, question, thoughts?
I have a thought that it could probably be used for a diving accident or something like that also.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For the chair, please.
Yes, please, Florence.
A bariatric ambulance is for overweight and obese people. It's a larger sized ambulance. This was asked for by the FDNY because as generations of people have moved on, people are larger than they were when ambulances were first made. So they're requesting for all of the district managers to request this for all of the districts in Queens at borough consultations. This was requested for overweight obesity.
Yep, you're right. I just looked it up, Florence. Thank you. The term bariatric, I think, was a little misleading for us, but thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. I'm sorry for being factually incorrect on that. I thought I had a bariatric chamber on board.
So did I. I totally did. It is for severely overweight and obese people who have a right and have a need for ambulance and emergency services just like everybody else. Any thoughts?
I think that we may want to talk about not just having one in every district, but having all the ambulances be geared for larger people. Because if there's only one in an area, then it's going to slow down the ambulance response. And when I did ambulance work, we had a rule of you're getting to the patient in 3 minutes. And then from the patient to the hospital, we would go to the closest appropriate hospital that we could get to in 10 minutes. And those kinds of restrictions would, if you have to wait for an ambulance, that's the appropriate size, there's a problem.
It's a very good point. Yeah, and we'll definitely make a note of that overall recommendation. Keeping time in mind, any other thoughts? Okay. Next would be a purchase of a mobile response unit. FDI requires a mobile emergency response unit to service the community. It relies on its vehicles to service a tremendous amount of people. I mean, I don't understand, and I don't know if you can help, Florence. What's the difference between this and an ambulance? What is exactly a mobile emergency response unit?
Whatever I put in the text, again, that too was asked by the NYPD. So the text there was very specific. It would be best to read that out loud. Also,
I did, and I don't think it's very specific.
Read it again. Read it. Can you read it again? I can't see it.
Sure.
It's very small.
Sure. FDA requires a mobile emergency response unit to service the community. FDNY relies on its vehicles to service a tremendous amount of people, and as the population grows, the inventory has not. This will make so is it just an additional vehicle?
So they need more vehicles. So listen, there are times where our precinct only has 4 cars. Our police precinct only has 4 automobiles. So when you're calling saying there's a car parked in front of your driveway, Dan needs to call at his house because he's been robbed. I have a heart attack and the police come out with the FDNY. They don't have enough vehicles.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
FDNY and police are understocked with vehicles.
Understood. Thank you, Florence. I think I got thrown off, just like with the last one, by the term mobile response unit. But thank you.
The other thing is, I gave you in the chat the Citizens Academy NYPD page.
That's great. Thank you so much. I don't think that any of us would disagree with the need to have more emergency vehicles. Any thoughts, folks?
Agree, because now when you call, you're waiting, and sometimes you wait more than 20 minutes,
Yeah,
and you put someone in life in danger.
I agree. And Shahanaz, you and I both work at organizations that serve large numbers of older adults. And we often do have to call an ambulance while they're on our
And
facilities, and the
and
waiting times do get longer and longer. I agree.
and also with the new system, when you call, you have to wait longer in the system before you reach the person who's going to answer you. Beside waiting for the ambulance, is like it's ridiculous. Sorry.
Yep, agreed. And any other thoughts? I feel like as the hour grows later, some folks are getting quieter, but please feel free to chime in and give your opinions on the ranking, on the overall importance, emphasizing, de-emphasizing. Frank, any thoughts?
Nope.
All right, let's move it along. Line 58, purchase liaison pickup truck or equipment training. See, these are also interesting because these, now that I think about it, some of these seem like capital, but vehicles tend to be capital. At least they do in my world, in my field, but we can make a note of that as well, as we talked about earlier. FDNY plays many roles. They are out in the field constantly. They require a pickup truck for various uses, including and not limited to use for equipment pickup, liaison pickup, training, and I don't know what a pickup, I guess it's just to move things around and get folks transported around and objects transported around. And as I found this description to be vague, and Florence, I recognize that this comes from the FDNY, not from you. It does say further study by the agency of this request is needed.
I'm going to be brutally honest with you. The district managers every year, I've been with the board for 17 years, converse with the agencies, and we don't get straight answers. And it has nothing to do with the wording of the requests. When the agencies choose not to give straight answers, they simply don't. A lot of times you'll get answers like this.
Florence, are you saying to me that city agencies sometimes don't give straight answers? I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked.
All the
that
time,
was sarcasm,
baby.
in case you didn't get it.
All the time. But yeah, we get a lot of silly answers like consult with your council people and things of that sort. We get diverted. Right. But right. This was asked by the agency, and what happens is moving manpower from one place to another place, moving equipment and items is absolutely necessary. We had an item like this for NYPD for 5 years. They finally got the truck delivered. So it takes years and years for these things to be on right. before an right. agency will provide it. And then when it was provided, it took 3 years to pick up.
I'm sure. I can relate to that. Any thoughts on this item?
Nobody else does. I have a meta reflection. I'm just seeing a lot of vehicles. Where most of the answers are at the citywide or state level. And it seems to me perhaps relatively intractable to list kind of a wish list of everything straight from FDNY, that we're kind of relaying the message from government to government, basically. And I'm just wondering if it makes more sense for us to prioritize the one thing that our specific district really needs right now is FDNY's, in our district, to have this type of vehicle. Instead of having their wish list, which is long or whatever else, is what's the one thing that matters for CB1, so that we identify something that's tractable, or else it's going to be, they're going to read it and see it exactly for what it is, which is one part of government using us to ask another part of government for money.
It's a good point.
What capital and expense budget and consultations are for. So it's for them to let us know from our firehouses, in our district, the equipment that they're lacking that they need. So when you're reading these, These are from the firehouses in our district that they're saying we need these.
No, understood. But
So
I
let me
looking at it.
share one that's not on the list
All right.
anymore. I got a phone call from one of the firehouses, which is very unusual. They didn't have a training door to teach the new firefighters how to break into the apartments. So they called and they asked for that training door. I don't remember the name of it. It was on our list for only 3 years, and they actually got the door. When they got the door, they called to thank me for talking to the chair at that time to put it on the list because they did receive it. Because these are things that the precincts and the firehouses are asking for at consultations. You don't have to leave it. I'm just sharing the background with you.
No, that's
I'm not advocating for it, just letting you know the background.
Daniel,
I'm
did you
looking
want
at
to
it a
comment?
little differently in that I see it as us, the community, filtering the request. So the firehouse is asking us for something and we're filtering it before it goes on to whomever it goes on to. So, I think it's more than just passing it through.
But I do kind of like, I do kind of like Frank's sort of idea that we, and I think we're doing it. It's probably going to involve some after work after this meeting, kind of picking a couple of these requests from the FDNY that are most pressing that we might make the strongest case for. All right. The next two I want to stress just straight out as, these are things that, yeah, go ahead, Florence.
We don't, the capital expense budget list sort of doesn't work that way. So these statements are the educated statements that are provided to be put on the list by the agencies. And when I do the data entry into the computer, changing the words or switching things around isn't going to advocate for it anymore. What happens is it's all a matter of the budget. And if a council person picks up on it and they want to elevate it and escalate it, or if the agency has a breakdown and they see that, oh my goodness, ladder company 116 had 3 trucks break down and they now need this, it's not, it's the importance of it is it being on the list or not being on the list. That's your important role, your task, to say, this has been on the list for 2 years now, and it hasn't gotten any action, so we don't want it. Or you say, well, FDNY asked for it, and maybe it's needed. That's your deliberation.
Right. Understood. Thank you, Florence. All right, we've got 2 items here. Funding for, did we do that? Yeah, no, we didn't do that. I feel like the CPR compression training, is that different than the earlier training? And then funding for smoke alarm programs. These are important items, but they seem to be items that can be funded by the FDNY Foundation. I just feel like in the interest of time, they should remain low on the list. But if others have different thoughts, I'm open to hearing that.
Agree.
Okay. Last item, funding for 4 boots for commercial trucks. These are for use during violations of regulations related to truck after hours parking regulations. This is a request from the NYPD, ranked 53. It seems that last year the agency said they will try to accommodate the issue within existing resources. I guess if it's still on the list, that means they did not accommodate the issue within existing resources. Is that correct, Florence?
Correct. So,
yep.
I don't want to be a bad guy and advocate. I got to be really careful how I say this. We have a tremendous problem with commercial trucks in our district. The pink trucks in our district all over the place underneath the Triborough Bridge. They come in pink, purple, and green. And we have a lot of tractor trailers now all along Astoria Park, all along Astoria Boulevard. In the industrial business zones, we have certain types of vehicles that are parking. These boots inhibit the negative action, and we don't have enough of them. So at your discretion, thinking about looking at our district and the impact on the nighttime illegal parking of very large vehicles, it would be at your discretion to see whether you want to leave it there, move it up, or remove it completely.
Understood.
But at your discretion, think about the Triborough Bridge.
Understood. Any thoughts from folks on the call about whether this should remain at the where it is in terms of priority or go higher? I hear Florence. I think everybody agrees that these trucks, this is not an issue of wanting these boots, is not an issue of over policing. It's an issue of allowing people to live their lives and move through the community and have the quality of life that they all deserve. So any thoughts about this?
We have a hand from Kathleen.
Yes, Kathleen.
Okay. Yes, this is an ongoing issue, especially on the streets around the Queensboro Bridge, along with the RVs that are parked there as well. My initial question is, do the boots really work on an 18-wheeler? And if so, who's going to take them away? And there has to be a plan in place to get them out of there once they're booted, because then it just makes things worse.
Very good point.
That
Otherwise,
was-
they're just sitting there
Would you like
booted.
me to, would you like me to expand on it?
Keeping in mind that we're really pressed for time, if you could do it in a quick manner, that would be great, Florence.
So there's a code and a fine. So they want their truck and they want their vehicle back. 90% of them have to pay the fine and move on. So they have to go to a certain place, pay the fine, have the boot removed, and so on and so forth. The ones that have to be towed are a problem because we did have a fire at the tow compound a year ago. So they don't have a lot of places. They're mostly taken to College Point.
Great. Thank you, Florence.
My,
I want to move. Yeah, go ahead. Is there more comment?
Just, with between those two, Kathleen was saying, and I'd almost think that really there's the interest and there's the position. I think boots might be the position, but the interest is dealing with the parking. And I wonder if the actual need here is more of the towing and less of the booting, because there are tons of vehicles that stay for very long periods. You boot vehicles, some of them are just going to be abandoned, whatever else, but rather better enforcement of just getting things towed and out faster would probably be a better quality, like improvement in quality of life faster than the boot thing. The boot is going to generate revenue, sure, but we just need the vehicles out of here.
No place to tow them. That's the problem. I spent 5 years getting rid of 54 RVs in the Steinway IVZ. And one of the big problems with the removal of the RVs was the fact that fire happened at the tow compound. And it was a miraculous feat when we got the task force put together in order to get all 54 either to HPD or to Section 8 or to get them to proper and appropriate campgrounds. Without the task force intervention, it never would have happened. We would have had to anticipate having them towed and compounded. It never would have happened.
So I want to keep us moving, but I think you've just answered the question, which is boots don't work. If we can't, the city doesn't have the ability to tow, then that's the problem we need to fix.
But
right.
Okay. I'm not going to say else. I'm done. I respectfully hear you.
All right. That's a great segue, because adding more towing is a new item. And I really want to give folks on this call an opportunity to bring up new items which they would like to add to our list. Yes, they go at the bottom, but this is the opportunity to bring new items, either capital or expense. Any folks want to go ahead and offer their thoughts or ideas?
Like now we talk about the, what you call it, the ambulance, the car, is the one for the size. Are we going to keep this one in the in the list, or we're going to ask for remove it?
Well, I think there's a need for more ambulances in general, and I think we can almost combine them, Shahnaz, and say we need more ambulances and we need them to be of a size that can
Yes.
accommodate everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you can make the size, like not only for certain people, like because we agree we need more ambulance, but not by size, because if we're calling and they said, no, this is for only this size, like we need to be sure is like for everyone.
Agreed. And I think we can notate in that way to make that point clear.
Through the chair, financially
Yes, Lawrence.
speaking, you would want to make it 2 separate items.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other new items? None? All right. Frank, any closing thoughts before we kind of go to any additional new business, and any thoughts on future topics and speakers?
My only reflection is thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you, Florence, for bringing all of your institutional knowledge, and especially thank you, Chris, for all the preparation you put into chairing this. Your first meeting was probably going to be one of the most difficult of the year, so we just all really appreciate your leadership.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your partnership. And let me echo, Florence, there was so much context and institutional knowledge given here that I would have not been able to begin to grasp. So your input is truly valued. All right, very quick.
Good job. Excellent.
Thank you. Any other items that were not related to budget that you'd like to bring up that we can either briefly talk now or add to future agendas?
Sorry, I would just say to add the decrease in uniformed officers' presence for the next meeting's agenda. I feel like we
Absolutely.
still need to
Yep.
have that discussion.
Okay,
Thanks.
we'll make sure to put it on there. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you for that. And in terms of that or any other topics, yes, we're going to have I was disappointed that they canceled. We will have a representative from the 114th. I personally, working in public housing, am interested in having a representative from one of the violence interruption groups that work in Western Queens to come. But I'd love to hear any thoughts about either topics or presenters for future meetings. Any ideas?
Regarding Miriam, about the police officer doing in Steinway, maybe we can ask the police officer come also and speak about this, because we need to know why they do this, and why, if the people protest with no violence, with no crime, what the problem? Because other people, I'm going not say any kind of people, but other people, when they protest, they not stop them. Why you want to stop certain people? Why you go to against certain religion, certain culture,
certain religion, certain protesting about
culture,
particular
country.
issues. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and we need to hear why you want to do this against some people, because it's not fair.
I agree. No, I think you're right, Shahanaz, and I think we can.
No. Frank has his kid. It's so good. It's so cool there.
I can't see anything. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry,
Anybody else?
my daughter snuck out of her bed and has joined the call.
Oh, look at that, sweetie. Hi there. Hi.
Want to say hi? You can wave hi.
Daddy's going to be free in less than 5 minutes. We
Yes.
promise. We promise.
We take that for
So
one
Shahanaz, we will do this. We will either have 2 separate conversations, a general one, and then one dealing with the over policing of Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities,
Yes.
or combine them into one, but make sure that topic is covered as a freestanding separate topic.
And the last
and also
thing,
the policing of
I have a comment also on that.
and peaceful protests. Absolutely.
Sorry, Danielle, let me finish it, and I'm
Sure.
so sorry. And the last thing, what the chief doing when this happened? Are they take action against this police officer? I'm not there. I don't know what is going on. When I talk about police, I talk about my relation, how I see the police in our community. I don't know how the police in Steinway. That's why I need to be sure everyone feeling equal, everyone feeling we are in the freedom, everyone has like the rights, like all of this kind of stuff. I don't want to use word. I like to be in actually action. That's why if we can hear also from the chief how they treat this kind of police when this happen, because for me, I want to walk in the street as a Muslim, cover her hair, because how we know the Muslim with the clothes style. They not know Muslim. If I'm a Muslim, not cover hair, they will not do anything. This is why if we can know how we feeling we are protected, because our police officer, when I'm talking, like when we talk about budget in any way, not only here, I'm asking for money for police officer because I think safety is number one, is the same between fire department, education, and all of this. If I'm asking money for them, because I know they protect us, but I need to be sure they protect us, not working against us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that, Shahnaz. Daniel, you had your chime in?
Comment. Well, two things about that. Whoever the person is that comes from the police department, I don't think it should be a public affairs person, because we're just going to get talked around. I think it should
Not
be
public affairs, community affairs, just to be clear.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd rather it be someone who commands the personnel, such as the commander of the precinct or someone like that, not someone who doesn't have the power to do anything as far as our requests. Just, then they'd say, well, I'll bring it back to somebody, or we'll discuss it, or, those kinds of things. When we give it to the guy in charge or the woman in charge, they can't say, I'm going to give it to somebody else.
Right.
So the buck will have to stop there. It might be a little difficult getting them to do that, but I would prefer that to be the case, that it's someone who actually can do something about our requests, or at least answer them directly, instead of saying, I'm going to bring it to somebody and we'll discuss it.
I like
take
that.
it under advisement.
And look,
all
we can be persistent. We can be persistent and try to get them to come. That's a good point.
Yeah, but we have to be persistent to the right people.
Yep.
Not just because otherwise we're spending a lot of time, and we're going to spend a lot of time anyway, but
My only, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was say my only call out is us as a community and as a committee, just some patience, because Chris and I do intend on meeting with and attending some of their meetings and building relationships with key folks that are not just the PR mouths, but also folks that are involved in some of these policy things. But it's definitely not going to be a one and done. It takes a while to build those relationships for them to feel invested in us to be invested in them. And so I'm a big believer. I've spent 13 years in peace building work, as some of you know, and it's very hard to, especially when it comes to things like public safety, to really make progress until you can have a foundation of relationship to work from. So that's going to be it's not going to be something we're going to solve in the next meeting, but it will be something we can chip away at over this year, over the coming years. And that's going to be the work before us. It's a really important part of it.
And Frank and I are committed to attending and being present at the precinct council meetings, at the PSA 9 meetings, which are the community meetings for the public housing police, to really make sure that these relationships are developed and strengthened.
Can we?
But I do not want to. One more thing, Daniel, and then I'll hear from you, and then I think if all agree, we'll wrap up. I do not want to diminish or put aside the feelings of Mariam and many, many other folks about over-policing, not only among the Muslim, Arab, South Asian communities, but among public housing residents, among young men of color and young women of color. We have to address this while at the same time building and developing stronger relations with law enforcement. And that's the challenge, and that's the tricky part.
I want to say, can we maybe go to the police academy, citizen police academy, maybe as a group? Because
I think it's a great idea.
My knowledge was when I went anyway, people went as a group from different precincts, different areas and things.
Let me share with you. I share also the link for the academy. If someone, this is how it's working. Is they do it, I believe, 4 times a year. Is by season. Is 8 weeks, and also now you don't go to only the academy. They send you in different precinct, different places.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's hard now. It's not like before you go to only the academy. The academy, I believe we went to like 4 times. The rest of the 4 times you go to different precinct, because they have to do different between all the people taken in the same time in different places. And also you have to apply, and is limit, because like a lot of people want to take this. And you need, if you want, you can go online or you can ask the precinct. Like for us, we ask PS9 and they help us, and we take seniors there. We educate a lot of people in there. It's good to learn and know your rights. And you can ask a question and you can tell them what the problem you see in the community, because you see the commissioner, like in the end, you can see all this kind of stuff is helping a lot. I believe all the time the key is educate. When you educate someone, you will get better and better. Chris, because I don't want to take too much time, I want to really thank you. It was a fantastic meeting, and Frank, first meeting and really good. I hope so. I do the same like you.
Oh, Shahnaz, thank you. Before we go, I know I keep saying we want to go. Do we have any? Does our public member have any thoughts? I don't know if he's still with us. Abdel Razak, any thoughts from you? We didn't hear a word from you.
No, thank you guys. I'm really enjoyed listening to you guys, and this is my first experience, so I prefer like first meeting to be quiet, to don't interrupt anyone. But I wish, I wonder how I can get a copy of the list you share it on your screen. Like, I need
we can send that out very, very easily. That's no problem. That's public.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that gets sent out to everybody tomorrow. Most folks have it, but I'll make sure you get it as well. Okay.
Yeah. And thank you so much, guys, for inviting me today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Frank, for being a great co-chair of this. And let's continue the conversation. I look forward to working together. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye, Frank. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night,
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mariam. Thank you again for coming.